Hello and welcome to the Voice of TOD. I'm Tom, and in this video I'm going to talk about what, in my opinion, is one of the most satisfying and enjoyable movies I've ever seen. That's right, it's Serenity, the 2005 film that gives us one last hurrah for the cast of Firefly. While with this being a big budget release, it has a very tough task of appealing to newer audiences while still connecting to the world, lore and characters from the 2002 TV series. We will be getting into spoilers in this, as I try to distill my thoughts down into some semblance of a review. But if you want a spoiler-free version, it's pretty easy. If you haven't seen this film, go watch it. Watch the series first, then watch the film. This is going to be a different kind of review to my usual film reviews, because I have a lot more to say on this topic, and we will be diving into spoilers, which expands how much I can talk about. I usually do approach the movie reviews to be quick, kind of 10-minute videos that you can watch just to get my thoughts on the film. But having spent the last 14 weeks rewatching the wonderful Firefly, I want to give this one more time. But we do still have a little bit of admin to get out of the way. The film is written and directed by Joss Whedon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Firefly, Avengers Assemble fame, and many other things that I'm not going to go into. The movie stars Nathan Fillion as Captain Malcolm Reynolds, Gina Torres as Zoe, Alan Tudyk as Wash, Raina Baccarin as Inara, Adam Baldwin as Jane, Jules State as Kaylee, Sean Mayer as Simon, Summer Glau as River, Ron Glass as Shepherd Buck, and Chiwetel Ejiofor as the Operative. The synopsis from IMDb: the crew of the ship Serenity try to evade an assassin sent to recapture telepath River. Yeah, I guess that works. First, before we get into the film proper, I want to talk about the changes between the TV show and the film. I think this is probably the best place to start, having, pretty much coming hot off the heels of last week's review of Objects in Space, which very much sets up a lot of the elements in this story. Yes, this film needed to appeal to a wider audience because it's bigger release, it was put in cinemas, it has a bigger budget that we will touch on. It needed to be accessible to people who probably hadn't seen Firefly. The changes and inconsistencies are really just to make the world easier to understand for the newer audience, make this feel a little bit more standalone. Big ones to me are the rescue at the start of the film, because it leans into Simon knowing a lot more than he actually does in the show. Simon and Kaylee's relationship, which has been dramatically cut back from the progress of the last 14 episodes of Firefly, really. And Mal being handled very differently throughout this movie. He was turned into something a little bit more jovial for the execs at the TV show. They wanted Nathan Fillion to be a lot funnier and much more approachable and heroic in the show. I think the film portrays him much more as a tormented soul, very akin to the pilot and the original idea that Joss had for Captain Malcolm Reynolds. There are some other changes, but these are the big three, and I don't really have an issue with them as such. A couple of gripes, but it doesn't break the film, the world, the show for me. You can explain Mal's darker edge to recent events. The film is set 6 months after the events of Objects in Space, roughly, and with Inara leaving and Shepherd Buck leaving, and work seeming to dry up, or they're having to turn down more jobs because of River and Simon and the price on River's head. I think all of this is just weighing heavy on our captain, and Mal has always been a character with a lot of flaws, but he's certainly flawed in this. And there is a big turning point in this story that only works with having Mal darker and almost at the edge of the man that he was. I think that this works, and I think it's easily explained. Simon's rescue of River at the start I'm also okay with. While a lot of this was set up in the show, there are some key things here that is purely for the newer audience. Simon doesn't share things in objects in space that turns out he knew. Maybe that's just to try and keep the truth about River quiet. I don't really know. You could probably explain it away, but honestly this is just to explain why River is what she is. I like how it's done. I like that we have her dreaming to this hollow record that introduces us to the operative. We will get to him later. It has an Inception-y feel, like a dream within a dream within a... I think it's done well and works well enough to establish the three characters mentioned in a way that's recognisable to fans but easy to understand for new viewers. My biggest problem is Simon and Kaylee being reset. It just doesn't feel right. Again, it's a gripe, minor, but I just think this was to create a little bit more of a drama between the crew. We already have Wash and Zoe together, so that's firmly planted. Mal, I would argue, is brokenhearted and mourning this woman who isn't in the film for the first half. The only people that you can really have this kind of teased affection, love situation is Kaylee and Simon. That's what they did in the show. We're just treading over old ground here. It does help set up the fact that Simon says this in the film, that his pure focus was on River, on making her better, on trying to understand what they did to her, and that blinded him to other potentials on the ship. So I'll let it slide. But again, I think that is a change for new viewers, that fans were probably... It's a little bit bland. It's a little bit boring, and it is very much the two of them running over old ground that we've already seen. The budget is a big change as well. This is now a movie. Bigger budget. Less time to tell the story, but a much bigger budget to do it. I think the effects look great. I would argue that they still hold up pretty well. There's a couple of things that look a bit rough, but honestly, it doesn't change the look and feel of the world that was created in the show. With the bigger budget, we get more of it. The worlds seem busier. It's a very diverse population that I love to see and makes sense for this universe. I feel there are maybe a little bit more other outside influences thrown in. There's a little bit of Star Wars Cantina, there's some Blade Runner neon lights. I kind of get the strong feeling that the Alliance is expanding outwards, and you can probably use that to explain away some of the difference in the technological elements. But this is still a giant mishmash of other cultures, and it works for the most part. I do have a little bit of an issue with the costume designs. Again, I think they had more money, so they could do a little bit more, make them look a little bit more individual. It's a minor gripe. I would also argue that maybe between the end of Firefly and the start of filming this, things just got lost. One unforgivable exclusion, though, is Vera. Vera loves to kill Reavers. She should be there. She's Jane's best gun. So over onto the overall story, and then we'll dive into the characters. So this movie is very much focused on the operative, River and Mal. While everybody else has moments, these are the core three. Fans already have a connection to River and Mal, but the operative is something new. Very similar to Jubal Early, who was the antagonist in Objects in Space, the bounty hunter, but on a different level. He is an assassin sent by Parliament to kill River, and I get the feeling that the operative is very much a when all else fails, last resort, hit the panic button, erase the evidence kind of guy. You see, River knows things, we as fans know that, but she's starting to remember, and this leads to a verse-changing revelation that sends Serenity to a place hidden from history at great cost. I think the first 25 minutes of this film really set up the tone of the film, but also the world for anybody that wasn't aware of Firefly. Like I've mentioned, the Inception-esque dream within a recording sequence tells us of Earth that was, and helps fill in the newbies on River and Simon. The operative is introduced really well, and then we get to Serenity and are introduced to the crew. Again, it all feels solid and very natural and organic to Firefly. The job itself, the heist, it works very well, and then we get our flavour of the Reavers. The Reavers are terrifying, again, but the budget has made them look cooler and much more savage. I love it. It's a great intro that re-establishes fans with Serenity and her crew, but gives newer viewers a decent enough crash course to get them up to speed. Also, the barn swallow is a great manoeuvre. There is character development in this, from or between the show and the film as well. This is 6 months or so between, and Simon has grown a little bit more in his ability to stand up for himself, because he stands up to Mal, which leads to Simon and River leaving Serenity. We are on a world with Fantine Mingo. We don't see them in the TV show, but they are old friends of Serenity, and they gave them the job for the heist. As Mal and Jane are discussing business with them, River walks into a bar and is triggered by an Alliance advert for Fruity Oaty bars and beats the shit out of everybody in this bar, including Jane's testicles, and is about to shoot Mal until Simon intervenes and with a certain phrase makes her fall asleep. This kind of leads in to part of what was mentioned in one of the scenes in Objects in Space, and the following exposition of Simon explaining River and what happened is a continuation from that scene. It works, it feels very natural for River. We know that the operative is out looking for her, and using this to trigger her, it gives him a location or an idea of where they could be. I think it works, and I think the bar fight is incredible. But the story then leads us to old friends and new locations, and River finally learning about Miranda, a planet that the Alliance set up as a new colony world years ago, but tested an experimental drug on the people to make them less confrontational, leading to more than 99.8, I think it is, % of the population just stopping. They just gave up. They all died. The rest became Reavers. I don't know if this was the right way to, I suppose, give us a Reaver origin story. I mean, it works, and it's clearly something that the Alliance would do, because we know from the show that there is this darker underbelly in this universe, and the Alliance have been doing dodgy things. But I think there's a romanticism to the myth that is still very much part of Firefly. That the Reavers were men who looked into the blackness of space and couldn't cope with what they saw, so they just went crazy. Again, it's mentioned in the film, both of them work. Both of them are very human ways to explain how Reavers became what they are, and the reveal doesn't make them any less terrifying, but it does lose that romantic edge, if romantic is the right word. But this does lead to one of the more impressive space battles of the last 20 years. Mal's plan to get the information on Miranda is to make Serenity look like a Reaver ship, much to the disgust of the crew, but they will follow Mal to the end, and it shows how far Mal is willing to go when he's at war. Again, that darker tone in the captain, doing the unthinkable to their home. He's driven by loss, by a need for revenge, but a belief to do what's right. Belief is something that Mal has been very much opposed to, but he wants to get this secret out. He wants to know what it is, and then he wants to tell the verse when they realise what happened on Miranda. And this means we need to visit Mr. Universe. He's featured in the film before. I don't really get his character. He's basically a conspiracy theorist who is trying to find the truth and get the word out on the Alliance or other dealings in the verse. But he's got some really impressive technology. Again, it's one of those things that I'm happy to let fly, but I try not to think about it too hard. I think we have a big budget, we need to get a signal out, what can we do, let's have a fancy world. It does lead, as I say, to just this ridiculous space battle, with Mal knowing that it's a trap to get the word out, he and all the Reavers who are not protecting Miranda, I don't think, but they orbit Miranda. Miranda is in Reaver space, as you'd expect. It's the origin of the Reavers. He starts a fight with all of their fleet and brings them to the Operative and the Alliance ships that are waiting at Mr. Universe's orbit. It's just a ridiculous fight. It's just so over the top. Side note, the Operative's command ship is beautifully designed. I love it. But this flight through this epic battle that's going on, it follows Wash being the best damn pilot in the verse, and Serenity just dodging and weaving through this battle. Serenity is basically unarmed. It has a cannon on it, but doesn't really do anything, and it's only there for really to start this fight. But it's this idea of such a small ship just weaving in and out of the explosions. I love this stuff. You have this huge backdrop that you see just fragments of. The rest is left to your imagination. It's so well done. But it does lead to Serenity crashing on Mr. Universe's planet, with the Reavers close behind. Now, Mal goes off to broadcast the signal and has a one-on-one with the Operative, as the rest of the crew are there to basically keep the Reavers off Mal and give him time to get the word out. I don't think anybody expected the good guys to lose. The hero always wins in a story like this, but they do take some heavy losses that we are going to talk about, but I want to focus in on the characters first. River makes a much bigger impression here, which makes perfect sense. She's becoming more aware of things. The story is very much focused on her. She's being hunted. She's learning things and she knows secrets. The writing very much gives you the impression that they are telling you more than you need to know, just so you're aware of everything. So the basis is that River was in a room with members of the Parliament and she managed to glean secrets from them, this biggest one being Miranda. And that she's this... Well, we already touched on it with Object in Space. She's a reader who knows things she shouldn't, but she's also very well trained, almost like an assassin. And we see that in the bar fight. One of my personal favourite fight scenes. The final fight too. River is just this cacophony of murder ballet. It really works. It's a dance of death and it's wonderful to watch. Summer Glau is clearly very skilled. It just works. They use all of her physicality and all of her grace and poise to just do these wonderful scenes of her cutting through people. I absolutely love it. I think it's great to watch and it really leans into River's character. We get that angle of assassin from her, really. Zoe and Wash, they feel very much the same, no complaints there. Kaylee and Simon, outside of the change to their relationship, individually they still feel quite honest and organic to the show. Jane, I would say, is a little different. Again, you can explain it away. He's very similar. He still has his gripes with River and Simon. He has clearly learned a few things following the events of Ariel, and I think he's a little bit harder, maybe a little bit more isolated from the crew now that Buck has gone. We know that he and Buck have quite a few moments together, and I don't think Jane really gels with other people very well. He cares about them in a Jane way. I definitely think Buck not being there has gotten him into a position where he's angrier, and he's more inclined to speak his mind. But he's Jane, and we love him. Inara, we knew was leaving, so she isn't in it for a big chunk of the film. I like how she's brought back and the way that they reintroduce her to the fans and the newbies are introduced to her. I think it works. She has some really cool moments and she feels very familiar to how we last saw her. She's clearly settled on this new world, this monastery that she is either set up herself or is a big part of, but she still carries a torch for Mal. I do have questions about her wardrobe and weapon choice for the final fight, but it doesn't break the immersion for me. I see it, I think, oh, that's a bit odd. You know, you're going to war here, you're going to lay your life down. But she looks cool. She always looks cool. And she still has that grace and that poise and that air of confidence that Inara has, so I'm more than happy with it all. Another character who isn't on the ship at the start is Buck, a very interesting choice to have omitted from the crew. But I think it really works. I love Shepherd Buck. And it does make sense that he would have found somewhere where he can put down some roots and spread the word that he was always trying to spread. Haven does seem like a really nice hiding spot for the crew of Serenity as well, when they need it. And it's very much set up that they are well known and well liked there, even in the few moments that we get with Haven. I have mentioned that Mal is handled differently, and I think this is because Joss wrote this all himself. He always had the idea of a darker captain. In the pilot, Mal is very different, very much darker. But this fits. In the opening, he has a chance to save a guy when the Reavers are attacking, but instead he chooses to push the guy off and leave him to his fate. When he sees the Reavers have grabbed this civilian, Mal does shoot him as a mercy. But this leads Zoe to question Mal for the first time on his morality that we've seen. This shows the audience, the new viewers, and the veterans, the browncoats, that this isn't the Mal that we're used to. And it really sets him up to go on this arc of almost being rock bottom to finding something to believe in again. Firefly has always been a dark show, and you don't really see it, but you know it's there. It's just below the surface. The movie dives into that, and I think that it sets Mal up wonderfully for this entire arc. There is a decent amount of humour from everyone. I'd say Mal gets most of it, especially with his reintroduction to Inara. It's wonderful, it's so Mal, it's so Firefly. This does feel like a very solid continuation from the TV show. There is a turning point in Mal's journey. A point where he finds the belief or the need to do what's right. He's always been a character who has been governed by what is right in his mind. That turning point leads him to war. It's set up quite, comes up a few times, quite firmly, that in the war between the Alliance and the Independents, Mal was a volunteer. Jane throws it in Mal's face, because Mal is a man who can't sit and watch people's freedoms be taken, watch people needlessly be killed for science experiments, and he just doesn't like what the Alliance are doing to, everybody. The idea of him going to war again, after running for so long, I think is him just reaching the end of his tether and turning around and taking a stand. War is something that has always followed Mal. It's touched on in the series, but we get to see what he's like firsthand here. And I think it works. He's always been running, or at least for the 6 years that he's had Serenity. And this darker Mal is really turned up to 11 after the events on Haven and the death of Shepherd Buck. We will touch on the two deaths, the two big deaths. Really, Mal's arc here is the age-old hero story. It works when it's done well. I think it's done really well here. And especially with this being a character that I just adore. I buy right into it. And I don't think anybody else could have delivered it quite like Nathan Fillion. I've probably said it before, but every member of the crew on Firefly in the TV show is cast perfectly, and that doesn't change here. Everything about them works for me. Now let's touch on our new face with the operative. He's introduced really well, and we get a sense of what kind of man he is. My word would be zealous. He's smart, he's effective, he isn't afraid to kill. He lives by a twisted code of honour, very much like Jubal Early, but he's much more of a believer in the cause. Over the course of this movie, we see how determined he is to make a better world for everyone, knowing that he won't be part of it, because what he does is wrong. And it's that realisation, that fanatical belief, yet understanding that it isn't right, that makes him even more scary, I think. His belief gives him strength, and again that makes him all the more terrifying. I think The Operative is an incredible inclusion to the film, and the only way that you could have an antagonist go up against Mal is to basically have him the complete opposite of Mal. Mal doesn't have any belief at the start of the film. The Operative is full of belief. He is his belief, the embodiment of his desire to see this or create this better world. As the film goes on, these characters intertwine and, their moments together, their fights, everything. The balance shifts from one side to the other. It goes over more in Mal's direction at the end, because it needed to. Mal needed to become the enemy, to beat the enemy. That's why this works. But let's talk about the two big deaths. First one, as I've mentioned, Shepherd Book. I'm man enough to admit it brings a tear to my eye nearly every time. It's so sad, yet such a pivotal moment in the story, and I can't see it playing out any other way. Mal needs something to believe in, and Book's final words give him that. Book's death is the fire that lights this cause, that pushes Mal into this path of war, but it instills belief back in Mal. I think it's a wonderfully well handled goodbye to a character any browncoat would wish was in their corner. His death has meaning on Mal as a character, and it marks the future of the verse. Because without Book's death, Mal wouldn't have had the belief to get the word out. Now let's talk about death number 2. I can't explain this one as well as Book's. After the epic space battle, Serenity crash lands on Mr. Universe's complex. And it's thanks to Wash's amazing piloting skills that nobody's killed. But out of nowhere, a Reaver spike tears through the window and impales Wash, killing him instantly, just as he's uttered his victorious, "I am a leaf on the wind, watch how I soar." There is a reason to why Wash was killed in this way and written out. It's not the intended fate for the character, but sadly this is what we have. In an ideal world, Wash would still be alive. He is a central part to the show. You see that in Firefly. As the series goes through the episodes, it goes up the gears, Wash becomes a more integral part to the crew. If we were ever going to get Firefly back with the original crew, without Wash, it would feel off. It would be missing a huge part. One of the reasons I don't want it back is because of that. It's such a drastic moment in the course of the crew's story together and their adventures, but I don't like it. It feels rushed, it feels needless, and I don't think we're given the time to mourn the character like we are with Book. But it does give the final battle a very dark tone, especially with Zoe. But she's blinded by rage. She's just lost her husband, and she tries to take on all the Reavers she can. She wants to go out in a blaze of glory, and if she's killed, she doesn't care. But that death, losing Wash the way we did, it does leave that question at the end. Well, if Wash can go, who's next? I could argue in the final fight there are other elements, there are moments. Zoe takes a pretty bad hit. She's fine, she makes a full recovery. Jane takes what could have been a pretty bad hit. Kaylee takes a really bad hit. And Simon, he gets real banged up. That all leads to the second wonderful fight with River. Just murder ballet through all the Reavers left. Which is again excellent, and I don't think there is anything after Wash's death that doesn't work. It's probably made stronger because of Wash's death. I just think it's a waste of the character that we've come to love. Now I think with anything that you make, you write, you do, there is always the hope of one last hurrah. Firefly was cancelled prematurely. Serenity, I think there was the hope when it was written that this could be a movie franchise. there would be the love of the community and it would do really well, and there'd be a sequel at least. But it also has the undertone of a goodbye to the characters and story for Joss and the cast. There is still a lot of Firefly out there in the world. You've got graphic novels, you've got books, but there are huge changes, lasting effects in this film that change the very makeup of Firefly. And this is definitely an end to the live action element of that. For the most part, this is a contained story. I still think it works. I still think it's great, and it really does close out everybody's chapter that was started in Firefly, runs through Serenity. Yes, there are problems, the big one, Wash's death, but I still think it's very rewarding just to see the crew back together for one last journey. I love this movie. Just like the show, I could watch it again and again and again, and to be honest, I have, and I don't get bored. The writing's really tight. I would argue that Joss goes out of his way to explain some of the things here to build on that world. You truly feel, or I truly feel, I'll use I statements, I truly feel that this is one of the most organic feeling universes ever created. I'm biased. I think the performances are great, and they really lead into why we love these characters, because the actors loved the roles that they played. Now, Nathan Fillion is one of my favourite actors, and I think he really shines in this. There's so much going on with Mal, and you feel it all. The rest of the cast hold their own too. They bring their A-game, just like they did with the TV show. I wouldn't expect anything less. The Operative is a hell of a standout too. This is the first movie that I'd seen Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he is perfect. He gives an incredible performance, and with the character written so well, and written to be the opposite of Mal, you need someone who is strong enough to stand up to somebody like Fillion and his charisma and what he brings to the screen. It does that wonderfully. The Operative's arc is handled so well. We get a character who is, again, trying to tear our crew apart, but this time, it isn't personal. It isn't for monetary gain, it's for belief. It really gets under Mal's skin. And in return, Mal gets under the Operative's skin. He is just brilliant. Of all the antagonists in the Firefly verse, from Niska, Jubal Early, I think the Operative is the most engaging, the most interesting, and the most terrifying. And he's a huge part to why this movie works. There aren't many movies that bring me this level of wonder and joy when I watch them. But the solid cast of characters that I would follow on adventures till the end of time, and the strong writing, just keeps me engaged rewatch after rewatch. It wasn't a successful movie. I don't even know if it made its money back after advertising, but to me it's near perfect. Now, next week we're going to take a look at another one of Joss Whedon's works, Dollhouse, which I don't think was as popular. It got 2 seasons. It's a very different idea to Firefly, but there are some familiar faces from other things, so hopefully you'll jump into that. Dollhouse reviews are going to be in a different style. Firefly is something very close to my heart, and I've put in the extra time to talk about it, and I get lost in these reviews because I just love it so much. I'm constantly thinking about it, and I enjoy it. Dollhouse I haven't seen as often, and I do enjoy. That's why we're going to talk about it, but not to the level that Firefly was. So reviews going forward will probably be a little bit shorter, but that shouldn't stop you from enjoying them too, hopefully. Now, if you do want to see more of my stuff, I am currently streaming Divinity Original Sin and the Mass Effect Legendary Edition over on Twitch. If you want to drop in, feel free to say hi. I'd love to see you guys there. You can also watch my previous live streams if you want to catch up on Todd Plays Games. That's the new channel where all the Let's Plays will go. And we will be continuing our game, movie, news reviews over on this channel. So there's plenty to come. And anything that I just feel the need to talk about. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.